Hello and welcome to the Holistic Recruiter Club. I am very delighted to be able to speak to you, Victor. We connected maybe a week or two ago, and I would love for everybody to tell you a little bit about you, what you're up to, where are you, and then we can really go into this really expansive topic of employer branding. So happy to have you.
Super exciting. Thanks again for inviting me on the podcast. I do
You're
love
welcome.
talking about employer branding, so I'm very happy to be here.
That's great.
Well, quickly about myself. I'm working in France since a couple of years back in a company called BlaBlaCar, but I'm originally from Sweden, so that's why I don't have a Swede accent like many of the other people around here. I joined BlaBlaCar almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, to kind of start the work with employer branding properly. We're a company about 700 employees at the time, and we're trying to figure out how can we set in place the foundation for employer branding. And since then, we've come a pretty far way, I'd like to say, launching a new career site, setting in place a bunch of processes internally of how to work with this topic. And now we're starting to expand our employer brand into our different countries that we have to make sure that we're not just doing employer branding in a global way, but also in a locally relevant way as well.
Okay, it's very cool. And yeah, I was really interested to speak to you because there's a lot of people talking about employer branding at the moment, but it's not their core job. It's like they're doing many, many other things. And what I find very interesting is you are dedicated to employer branding, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I am, from our chat, you told me so many nuggets of information. I've tried to make as many notes as possible from our pre-call to make sure that everybody can get some really good kind of insights from this. And something you said to me that you wanted to do from this is really give some concrete examples of things that people can actually do. It's not just the pie in the sky stuff that everyone talks about, but it's borderline impossible to implement, right? And I thought we could maybe start with the careers page because I think that sounded like something you were quite passionate about, and it seems kind of like something that anybody could do right from the beginning.
Absolutely. It's you can set the level exactly where you want to. I worked in a career project in a big company with many employees and so many different countries and a lot of complexity, and it took years to put the project in place. And here at BlaBlaCar, we were able to finish the career site in about 9 months. And so, but still, we were able to get some quite good results using a very nice platform that I'll be happy to talk about more later called Webflow. And so I believe that depending on your ambition, depending on how much time you have to spend on the project and how many people can help you internally, you can really set the level yourself. But I think the most important thing is that you do something to have this one page or platform where talent can find information about how it really is to work in your company.
Yeah. And you spoke about Webflow. Why is that significant?
I think that Webflow is a very nice tool because it's a technically advanced tool, meaning that we can do many great things with it. And I have a tech team to help me do that as well. But I don't necessarily need them to do important changes to the platform, like changing a section of a page. But of course, the images, the text, and videos, I'm able to edit that myself.
Yeah.
And push this into production when I think that this actually looks fine. And this is something that not a lot of tools allow you to do. And we're able to do this with the blessing of the tech team, of course, but in a quite independent way. And this really helps us to keep our content alive and make sure that all the images that we have are updated. All the content that is there is always reflecting our EVP. And I think that is really important because I can see in Google Analytics every month how many people are actually coming to our page, looking at it, spending time on different pages. And I can adapt the content according to what is important to us right now and what are we trying to tell talents when they come to this platform.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it really is it's a marketing role, right? When you look at it, this is really fundamentally what it is. And you were speaking about the tool, and Webflow, I've used it myself as well. It's super nice to use, right? And you can be very techie or not very techie at all and still get a lot out of it. And at the moment, you have an ATS, right? Like an applicant
Yes.
tracking system. Which one is it
Correct.
you use?
We're using Lever.
Okay, you Lever. And does Lever do you have access to their potential careers page that you could add on, but you haven't chosen that and you've used Webflow instead, right?
There are different ways you can do this, and these are the kind of stuff you discover when you start working on this fun project. You can choose how much you would like to integrate your ATS in the system, and of course, you could also create a career site with Lever, and I know a lot of companies are doing that because it's just easy the way that you can integrate the ATS to the platform itself. We chose to use a different platform, so Webflow, in order to do this. But even if you do that, you can integrate the ATS in Webflow in different ways. Either you can just have one button on your career page where it says, take me to the open jobs, and it will take you to the Lever page. Or you can have something in between, which is what we're using, which is to have the open list of positions on your career site. But when you do the application itself, you will be redirected to Lever, but just for that role. And I think this was one of the middle grounds that we found were good for us because it didn't take as much work to integrate this with Webflow, but still it allows you to stay on our platform to browse the different jobs that we have open. And I think this is very important because I do want our user to spend as much time as possible on our career site because this is where we have everything, the branding and the content and so on. And just when they decide to apply for a job, then we can take them somewhere else because, well, we've already reached our goal. They want to apply for a job at our company. I'm happy, and I don't mind if they go away for a few seconds to give us their contact information.
Yeah, of course. So I like this, and this is all about using the right tool for the right job. Because as you said, using something like Webflow rather than the bespoke tool that they have, you've got so much more flexibility and possibilities of what you can do with that and get much more creative, right?
Absolutely. I mean, here the possibilities are endless, more or less. If I had more time to spend on this, I would be happy to do so because just even myself, without that much technical knowledge, I can get quite far when it comes to how I can design the web page. But unfortunately, also there are some other teams I have to respect, other stakeholders to keep in mind before
Yeah, of
playing
course.
around too much, integrating fun things on the platform. But yes, we are able to do much more ourselves, and it saves us a lot of time because I've already worked in companies where every change we had to do is done with an external IT team, for example. And so we create a ticket saying we want you to do this very particular change on the site. And then depending on the size of the change, it's going to take a little bit of time. And then there's always back and forth where, well, the text isn't aligned properly, or we would like a little logo to be here too. And so every little change like this will take a little bit more time. And this makes even the simplest change just more time consuming compared to when you're able to do it yourself. I already know exactly how I want it to look like, and I'll just make it happen in a few
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah, exactly. I think that naturally goes into something we were speaking about before, which is around how do you get the buy-in from the stakeholders that you have to have inside the company to be able to have that kind of freedom to do what you want. So anybody that's listening and they're like, yeah, I really want to work on this. I know we need to work on this. What type of things should they be doing to try and get that same level of freedom that you've got in the role right now?
Hopefully they won't reach out to me internally after this and say, what the hell? No, but I think that it's very important to define first exactly what kind of changes you would like to do and what potentially you could do in the future. When you design a web page or a website for the first time, you work closely with many different internal stakeholders, and they're all helping out with very specific things. We have an internal creative team who's helping us with the design, the layout, photography, and so on. And then we have our tech team who's helping us with the tech figures, all the content related to tech, and so on and so on. And it's just important that everyone is aware of the future potential updates that may happen later on. And so that everyone is aware of potential changes that you can do. And then just make sure that you decide together what is it that we're able to do on our end? When do we need to reach out to internal stakeholders? And when do we have to create a separate project for bigger changes on the site? So, of course, the way of getting approval depends on every company. I think our process looks quite differently, and especially I'm working in a scale-up company. If you're working in a startup, it's going to look different. If you're working in a bigger company, it's
Yeah.
going to look quite different.
The context is key
But
there, right?
absolutely, and keeping everyone up to date, I think, is something you have to keep doing. It's not just once asking for permission and defining what you can do, but also when time goes by, that you stay in contact with these different stakeholders. And this is not just for the career side. I mean, this is for um, different communication campaigns that you're doing or different things that you might be working on to keep everyone up to speed so that there will be no big surprise 1 year later and that your freedom is then limited because they realize that you've done a lot of different things that they weren't really aware of.
And how do you go about doing that? You say you have to keep them informed. Like, what does that really look like?
For me, it looks like having key contacts in different teams. I have one contact, for example, in our corporate communications team, and every month we sit together and we go through different projects that we're working on. I ask him different questions about more business-related topics that might be relevant for us when we communicate about working at our company. And if there's anything more urgent, we'll just send a message to each other. But every month we really sit down and look at what exactly are you working on right now? What are we working on, and where could there be any sort of um, dependencies, or where could this impact you in your work? So that's they just stay aware that way. And I try to do this with the most important stakeholders. So I have a few people in our engineering department, for example, that I meet up with on a monthly basis. Talent acquisition, of course, understanding who we're recruiting right now and what are their major difficulties. Um, our sustainability team, for example, as well, keeping us informed of different reports that they're getting in and so on.
Okay, so it's about really sitting with the people, if possible, to really go through this, making sure you're staying aligned, making sure that everybody knows what's going on. There's no kind of like things hidden that could just pop up to bite you, right? It's what you're
Absolutely.
trying
I
to
mean,
do.
this is what works for me. I think that some people are trying to reduce the amount of meetings they have every week, and I can understand that sometimes you just don't have a lot to say to each other, and so you don't want to waste time.
Of course.
But at least where it's relevant, define reoccurring time. It doesn't have to be every month. There are some teams that I meet less often than that, but at least have a reoccurring time where you sit down and you give them the key information. It can be data from our side. It
Yeah.
can be the different projects that we're working on and so on.
Yeah. And talking about that with data, you now let's go through this, right? Like, you've just started, a bit like when you said you've just joined and you're setting up the employer brand. The employer brand, when people say, yeah, we don't work on employer brand, we don't have one, I don't think he's right. I think that's a bit of a faux pas, because you do have an employer brand. You choose whether to work on it or not work on it, right? It's there. No matter what you do, it's there. So for someone that's just about to start this project, employer branding, very vast, where do they start? What do they need to do? Like, one thing I really want to talk about is the first 90 days. We don't need to do the full 90 days now, but at the very beginning, what do they need to do? How do they understand and define the EVP, the employer branding, the marketing element of it, the copy? Where do they start?
I think that there are many different things that you can do, and I think first you also have to be mindful of the time, the resources that you have. I know at BlaBlaCar, even before they hired me, there were still people working with employer branding, but a little bit on the side, like you said. And so for them, it was most important to think about, well, first of all, what is the objective? What do we want to do with our employer brand? What is it that we want to improve? And there are usually small fixes that people work on before they start working with the EVP, for example, or making a big revamp of the career side, and which is more dependent on short-term needs. But when it comes to more long-term branding and thinking about how do we want to be perceived, I would say that the EVP is one of the first things that you should think about. And I don't think you have to do something super complex the first time. It's just about understanding more concretely who are we as an employer, who do we want to be perceived as, and who are we going to hire in the coming year.
Victor,
Because I think
could you
that
some people might hear EVP, 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 and for those that know, obviously it's very obvious, but for those who may not necessarily be that familiar with EVP, could you just explain what it is and what that actually means?
absolutely, EVP, or the employee value proposition, is really who we are as an employer and what we can offer to the people who might join our company. It is also who we aspire to be as an employer, in a small way, and it is also who we are looking for, what we're looking for in talent, when we are recruiting. And it's I say aspire as well, because the employer brand is not just who we are today, but it is also who we want to be in a couple of years, because companies are always evolving and changing, and so the EVP is also evolving with this. And therefore, it is important to include not just HR, but also the corporate communicate, or the corporate brand, and our business strategy. Who are we looking to be in 5 years as a business, and how can we adjust that to our employee value proposition, in the sense that it's probably not going to be the same working here now as it will be in 1 year. So how can we include that in the EVP by also thinking about which direction are we going?
Okay, thank you.
And so this is my understanding, at least, of how we work with this topic. And the first things to do is the easiest one and the nicest one, which is just to sit down with people around the office, if you're a small company especially, and to better understand what they think about the company as an employer, what are the main things that they appreciate. And what we did at BlaBlaCar is we did this in three main ways. First one is a big survey to send out to everyone. That is a quite detailed survey with many different aspects of us as an employer, and trying to be as objective as possible, and to try to identify which are the main pillars of wanting to work in this company. What is it that drove people to come here? What is it that gets them to stay? And then also sitting down with people and talking in detail about these specific topics that you found in the survey. You may have found that flexibility is a very important aspect of working in our company, which was for sure the case for us. And if you ask our HR manager, he might say that, well, of course, it's because of our remote policy, but there are more things to this, and this is what you'll figure out while actually speaking to people. It's true that the remote policy has a big effect on how you're perceived as an employer, but it's bigger than that. It's also about trust. It's about transparency. If you have people working from all over the country, you're going to have to trust each other to do their job, because you won't be able to be there and look over their shoulder.
So this is you've really just. I saw something on LinkedIn the other day, maybe even today actually. I was trying to just quickly find the exact quote, but there was something to do with the internal employees. So your current employees, when asked, do you think that our employer branding that we project outwardly truly reflects what they live internally in reality? I'm sure I will try and find the link and I'll add it to the podcast after in retrospect. I'm sure it was something like only 20 or 30% of people felt like it truly reflected the real life inside the company. So my question to you is, and this isn't aimed at BlaBlaCar, this is aimed just generally speaking, if a company is you're being asked to work on employer brand, and you're like, yeah, but this isn't really the reality. You know, it's like, oh yeah, we're team player, flexible working, la la la. And then really it's like, no, it's really top down hierarchy, and it's 5 days compulsory on site. You must be there by 8:30, must leave by 6 p.m. I'm exaggerating, right? But what should people do if they're being put in that awkward situation of trying to sell the company versus the reality of what it's like? Does that make sense?
I feel very excited working for that company, first of all. Um,
Lee,
but
you
and
can't say just leave. That is a cop out. Okay, you have to find a way to answer this.
right. Well, I mean, I would start with the people. Uh, the people are what makes the company in the end, and I think this is what makes it fun to work in a company too, especially if you have difficult working conditions. Ask the people what do they really like about working there. Make sure that these are the main messages that are reflected on the career site, for example, and make sure that the faces of the people are there and to show these are the people working in our company. This is what they think, and make sure to that their message is as authentic as possible when you put it out there. I think that a mistake that a lot of companies do is that they're so guided by their core values that they have as a business that this is everything they want to push externally, but it doesn't always entirely reflect the thing that people think, like you said. And so you're never going to be able to have a site that's completely um, done with only what the employees say, but at
Of
least
course.
find a good balance of sure, this is who we are, this is our vision, this is our company mission, and so on. But who are the people working here that are also inspired by this? What are they driven by? And how can they inspire other people to join their team?
Yeah, I like this. There's there is a guy. I'm going to tell you. He is called. Just checking now. Uh, Chris LeCant Harwood. Okay, and he's been posting a lot of stuff about employer branding. And one of the things that I like that he was talking about, I'd love your view on it, is the power of the internal like a person, right? So how do you use your employees for your employer branding without mandating them to do something? It's not like, right, everyone, for the next 6 weeks, we are going to do stages of updating Glassdoor to make sure we have a really good Glassdoor. Oh, by the way, here's some sweets and some bonbons. Okay, like, no. Like, we're not talking about that. Like, how do you leverage people's kind of their, I don't know, their own personal brands or their experiences? Like, do you have any view on that of being able to do that, or do you think that that should be a naturally occurring thing?
Well, it should be naturally occurring, like you say, because well, otherwise it's going to be unauthentic. However, there's always going to be some kind of natural communication coming from your employees. And I think that is our job as employer branding manager to identify these little things and help them continue that communication. So instead of being like, click this button and we will make a post for you on LinkedIn automatically. Instead, find this person who's already making a couple of posts on LinkedIn or has expressed willingness in some way to actually do that, to say, well, here's a 1 hour workshop that we'll do for you to better express yourself online and how to improve your personal brand, because we know they're already interested in doing that. And then they will probably, after this, do more online. And if they're looking better online, then you're going to look better online, even if they're not even talking about you, because there's always the engineer at BlaBlaCar in the time. And LinkedIn is just a part of this. A way we do this too is through our blog. Our engineers don't always love LinkedIn that much, but they do like their job and they love talking about their job. They do this through articles quite a lot. And so we try to help them by, first of all, saying that we like when they write articles. We are completely fine that you do this on working time, sitting down, thinking about this project that you've been working on or this new objective that you have, and help them along the way to put together this article, and then make sure that when they have finished the article, show internally that's what a great job they've done to inspire others to do the same, and then share the article externally saying, look at our wonderful employees, look at their expertise, and you could become one of these if you join this company.
Yeah, and this is good. And what type of tools are these or websites do you think the engineers are using to share these kind of articles, like Substack and stuff like this, or like in terms of, I don't know, Discord communities? Where are they doing this?
Uh, there are a few different ones. For our articles, we're mainly on Medium.
Okay, yeah,
And I think this is a nice place to have a semi-corporate, semi-personal platform because you upload the articles on your personal accounts, but then you're able to publish them on our BlaBlaCar blog, and I think this is nice. So we usually do it like this. I know some companies have like integrated blogs on their career sites, which is another option. But
yeah,
then I feel like it's more corporate
yeah,
compared to doing it on a site like Medium.
yeah. Okay, I like this. And do you use and how do you from an employer branding perspective, you don't need to necessarily get involved in these articles because it's the individual that's effectively doing it for you, right? Like not doing it for you, but they're contributing to the overall employer brand, right? You don't need to do anything in particular there. Or do you find a way to kind of like track this these kind of metrics of what's being, I don't know, who's interacting with them, the number of views they're getting, engagement, that type of stuff, or not really?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to do this with everything that we do. I think that when it comes to ambassadorship and engaging our employees, this is the most difficult thing to track. Because when we do LinkedIn posts, for example, we have so much data on how many people are watching and how many people are following us and so on. On Medium, we can see how many people are uh, clapping as they do on Medium, commenting, and how many people are reading. So we do have data from this. What is difficult is to track everything, meaning people who go to conferences as speakers. How do we track how many LinkedIn posts people are doing? Because if they're not tagging us, for example, we don't really see what they do. But I see on my personal feed that people are posting all the time. So here's where there's a lot of difficulty tracking, but at least find some metrics that you know that you can easily see every month, such as on Medium, we can see how many people have been interacting with our articles and how many articles did we get out this month, and try to look at this from a 6 months, 1 year perspective and see when are we doing better and is it because of some of these things that we've been doing? Is it because of the workshop that I set in place that people are actually getting inspired?
Yeah,
Or is that not really doing anything? So at least this is a way we can also see if these things that we do to support our employees are actually making a difference.
yeah. You basically answered the question I was going to ask, which is about how do you define the metrics and what are the challenges of getting the metrics together. So maybe I could change the question. Would be again, you have somebody that's now responsible for employer branding. What metrics, at an absolute minimum, do you think they should be tracking and reporting on to measure success, or even just to track to see trends? You know?
Absolutely, I think it's good to also find a couple of competitors, but so to start off, to start very simple with for the articles for the posts, how many posts or articles are you doing, how many people are reacting to them, just the engagement, and then look at least five other competitors that you think are on your level and track them manually, which is probably what you're gonna have to do in the beginning before you get a social media tool to track, and then start with something basic and see if um, you're actually doing better than your competitors or not. Are you kind of slacking after them, or are your articles working better than they are? I think this helps you a lot too, because when you're doing this for the first time, it's difficult to know 1,000 people are reading my article. Is this great or is it not that good?
Yeah,
But you can, as long as you start looking at other people that are kind of your size or and a little bit bigger to see as an inspiration, it helps you navigate your efforts as well.
so effectively, you need to set a baseline to know what is the right. The same way you would go to a doctor's to know like how well does your heart work, right? Okay, like this is your baseline, right? This is all of your like basic metrics, and now you know that if you're slightly below that or above that, you know what's good and what's not good, right? And then once you have that, then you can go to the market and start to compare that to what are the standard like good and bad metrics, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's important here to keep in mind that it's okay to fail. It's okay to not reach the metrics right away. If you spend so much time on comparing and tracking that you lose track of what is most important, which is just to get your stuff out there, I think you're kind of losing time in the beginning as well. So I think that in the beginning, it's okay to just gas, get out there and do what you would like to do. And then after you've done that for some time, take a step back, and now you look at all these metrics and your competitors and see were there periods when we did better, were there periods where we did worse, and how can we do even better next time?
Yeah, and how you can do better. And I think that's it. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and she's head of AI in recruitment. So not recruiting for people for AI, but she's head of looking after how they can implement AI within the recruitment processes. And
Wow.
she's also in the Army Reserves in the UK British Army as well. So she does this part time, and she also works here and does this stuff. And she's kind of got this really interesting blend of experience. And something that she said that the Army has instilled in her is like, be brave and fail. Just keep failing. The only way you're going to learn is if you fail, right? You need to keep putting yourself in situations where you're going to fail because then you can learn, like, what can I do better next time? And when you're in a difficult situation, you've got all of this learning and knowledge on how to go forward and do it. So I suppose I've got a question for you. There was an event that I used to go to. It was called Mistakes Club. And you had to go and basically say something you've done that just didn't work out, right? And then how did you overcome it? And some people didn't overcome it. They just left it and never came back. No, I'm joking. But I give an example of this. I remember once I was working for a company and we were desperately trying to attract more candidates. And we decided someone had called, I don't know, it was a good sales pitch. And they were like, all right, EasyJet, you know, the airplane company, the airliner. They were like, oh, we've got this really like last minute campaign. One of our advertisers has pulled out. Would you like to get involved? And we were like, yeah, let's go. So me and the head of growth, we had this chat. We spoke to a bunch of people. We forgot to speak to the founders because we were too excited. And then we signed the contract and just went with it. And then they started to see why are we advertising inside EasyJet? So it didn't go down too well. So that was my mistake. There is an example. We did it. I didn't set any metrics up or anything like that, right? So this was a lesson learned. Always make sure you speak to the key decision makers and also make sure you define some things you want to track. So I just wondered if you had any examples of being brave and failing, but it didn't matter.
One of our principles here at BlaBlaCar is more or less this, and also similar to the military one you said earlier. It's fail, learn, succeed.
Yeah.
And what is good about this is that we have this system inside where when we make a mistake, we write a little report and then we share it with the rest of the company. So both you get to learn, but you also show others that it's okay to fail. An example that I can share from last year, it was we had a great idea, and I'm looking forward to doing the same thing again. But we did something for the first time. It was an online webinar, and everything was pretty much set in place with our CTO who was there, with an engineer who was going to answer questions live from people who were interested about our company. And we put some money in the communication ads and all of this, and it looked quite well until the D-Day where we were sitting there and waiting for the stream to launch, and in the end it never launched. So people were just waiting in the waiting area while we were mildly panicking behind. And in the end, it was kind of an offline recording. We had we did have like 10 people left after 20 minutes when we finally got it to work.
No.
So that was a little bit of a little bit annoying for sure, but at least now we look back and we say, well, maybe think about the technical details a little bit harder next time.
No, but this is, it's one of them things, and you can turn that into a positive by messaging everyone after saying, yeah, hands up, we had a nightmare. Like you can be very authentic in that situation, I love this. There is definitely something to be said about what civilians can learn from the military, because they have some incredible systems and ways of thinking and ways of approaching things, because they operate in such crazy environments. To be able to, like you said, it's like fail, learn, succeed, or improvise, adapt, and overcome. And they've got all these proper systems. It's not just a come on, everyone, let's just crack on. There's a real, science behind it. Okay. And in terms of if you had to give 3 bits of advice to someone, right? So someone's listening and you had to give 3 bits of advice, what would they be about employer branding? If they only had limited resources, limited time, limited money, limited whatever, what 3 things would you tell them to focus on?
I think that the first one is similar to what we said earlier, and is properly understanding who you are as an employer and being as real as possible. I think that some people make the mistake of only going to their HR department, asking what are the benefits that we have, what are we offering, and then going to the corporate communications, asking what is our company vision, who are we as a company, and then kind of settle there. But it's so much more than that. The people make the company in the end. So if you don't understand the details about why people are staying, or why these benefits that you have, or why this vision that you have is so important for the employees, you won't be able to communicate efficiently, because you only have the surface of why it's nice to work at your company, but you don't have the important details. And these are the ones that are so impactful to share externally, because they're coming directly from the people. So know yourself, I think, would be the best one. The second one would be metrics, and being data centered in a realistic way. I think a trap that it's easy to fall in, and definitely one that I fell into in the beginning, was to track as much as possible. Because when you don't have that many things that you can track, employee branding can be difficult sometimes. Well, you just take everything that you can, and in the end, you don't really do anything with about 70% of it. So you've wasted a lot of time just gathering all this data and not really doing anything with it. So choose a small set of data, especially if you don't have a lot of time. Choose a limited set of data and have a clear objective next to it. If you're tracking your engagement, is it because you want people to engage with your content, or is it just because some guy on LinkedIn told me to look at my engagement? Or do you want people to go to your website? Well, maybe then engagement is not that important, but then track the amount of people coming from this link to your career site. Make sure that there's a clear objective set to your metrics, so that you don't just understand how you're doing, but how is your objectives being built by these different metrics that you have. And then the last one, I feel like I'm copying the things we said earlier, but I think the last one is such a beautiful thing, is to just dare and fail. And when it comes to employer branding, it's such a new topic, and I think it's since a lot of people are a little bit insecure in the beginning, not really sure what to do, and you find a couple of guides online, and you want to do something that works because you're trying to sell this new thing, employer branding, to leadership, and so obviously you're trying to build this up with data and so on. But what you really should be doing is to explore, try new things, be a little crazy sometimes, and this is where the real results are going to come in. A little fun example from last year, we have a little band in our company playing music, and they sometimes do a little concerts internally, and this is super fun. And you can feel the culture when you hear this band playing, because these are our colleagues, but there's so much more than just working here. So I thought, well, why don't we just do a concert in the street, and people who can come by will see that, well, this is for our employees. It's more than just programming our application. It's there's so much more behind it, and people seeing our employees doing something like this together, it shows it's very special culture. It shows the bond that they have between each other, and I think it's a fun way of kind of thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, I like this. And it's one of those things, I like to think of things in moments, right? And it is one of those things that will resonate. People will remember that, right? It's something a little bit different. It's not something you see every day. And it will be like, oh, I remember that. They'll put that 2 and 2 together, and they'll think, oh, BlaBlaCar, yeah, what are they doing? And it's just about being fresh in mind, isn't it? So when they're thinking about a job, oh, maybe I'll have a look and see what they're doing. I saw they did something a few months ago when I was scrolling through LinkedIn or wherever they were. Yeah, I like this. So how authentic can you be? Because there are so many people pushing, right? We need to be transparent. We need to do this. But there's also other factors, right? If you've got a really, let's dare say it, a really crappy culture, right? And you know it's crappy, but you're trying to work on employer branding because that's one of the elements you've picked to try and improve everything, right? This is one element. This is one element to be able to change the perception of how you are internally. So you might be trying to do a bunch of other stuff internally, but it's not quite there yet. How honest can you be when you've got investors and you have customers and you have all this other stuff, and if you come out and go, right, at the moment it's really bad internally, but we're working on it, and by the way, come and work here. Like, do you see my point? Where is the line there? Or is there not a line?
No companies. There's always a line. No company is perfect, that's for sure. And sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better. But there's always going to be something that people like and something that you can push. And if you're working on your culture because it's not really where you want it to be, there's probably something else that is where you want it to be. Hopefully, there's something at least. So focus on what is good now, and also mention, like I said, there's this aspirational part of employer branding of where you want to be. Keep it in there, but don't focus on it. So if it is your culture that you're working on, you can keep it in your EVP, you can keep it in your communication in a way, but maybe right now growth is what you're going to get when you join this company, because you're going to have to work hard to on a specific business project, for example. So you might learn a lot doing that. I would focus on that instead and be authentic with that. And then if someone is complaining on Glassdoor or whatever it can be about your culture that is improving, then you can be more authentic, I think, and say, well, these are the concrete things that we're working on right now to improve it, and not just say, yeah, it's kind of terrible, but say, thank you for leaving the feedback, and we recognize that there are certain things we need to work on, and this is what we do to battle them. But that's not what you would say on your career side. Then you maybe would just focus on something else, like growth, or maybe you have something else that your company is bringing.
So if I'm reading between the lines there, it's not the employer brand's goal to be that authentic on that stuff. At the end of the day, you're still trying to attract people to come to the business. And I suppose that it then comes down to how well you set up the interview process and how honest you are in that initial call as well, to say, like, these are the things that are not working. So you don't need to publicly be going, oh God, we're so bad at this. We're really bad, but we're working on it. But instead it's like, look, thank you for applying. Lovely to meet you. This is what's working. This is what's not working. That way you could be a little bit more open about things when you're in that kind of in those initial stages of the interview. I think it'd be important to share that then, as opposed to publicly. I don't know what you think about that, but
I love it. Yeah, that's so true. And it's true that I've been a little bit stuck in this attraction phase of employer branding, but it's true that I worked with the EVPs throughout the entire talent cycle, and the recruitment and the onboarding is also part of not what we do, because I'm not a recruiter, but I can still work together with the talent acquisition team and to help them set up guidelines and messages, and also guide them through what can you say during the interviews and how do you present the company and so on. And I think it's a great way of being authentic, like you said. And I think that it is something that we do here too, and not in the sense that, well, this is good, this isn't, but rather saying that if you like these sort of things, then you're probably going to like it here. And if if this is something that you're very passionate about, it's probably not something that you're going to find here. And this is exactly something you could say during the interview. Absolutely.
Okay. I've got one more question for you, right? I say that and I'll probably ask you a follow-up. So imagine, I love this question. It's very consulting, but you've got the magic wand, right? And the magic wand really is like carte blanche. You can do whatever you want. Okay. What would you do in your position right now if you had unlimited resource and unlimited kind of scope to be able to do what you wanted, to have the biggest impact possible? What would you do?
I think that right now, what I would like to do even more is to have time and resources in our different countries that we have, because we are hiring right now in 5 different countries. And so it's very important to have the support locally to understand how can we reach this audience in a relevant way. This is something, at least big for us right now. And so if I had this magic wand, is to really get more something concrete set up in every single country, so that we don't just have one centralized employer branding team doing everything for them, but having them do the work, because that's what they're going to be good at, and having us in the being here to coordinate everyone to make sure that our global EVP is still there. We still have this unified brand, that we're able to communicate it in a more localized way. And this is something that is quite difficult to do when you have a very centralized team. And so I think that having these local resources really helps us to do that in a good way. So, but this is something a little bit time consuming to set up.
Of course,
I'm
yeah.
sure that in a couple of years we're going to have it. It's just that I'm waving this magic wand very slowly. So that's what we're working on setting up. And as soon as I finished swirling the wand, I'm sure that we will have some local representatives in each country who can take care of the communication, who can know the audience and what they need better.
Yeah, I bang on about it all the time, but there's the culture mapping book by Erin Myers. It really talks to this, because if you're talking to a certain persona in France, it's very different to talking to someone in Germany or the Netherlands or Spain or the UK, and because there's that kind of like the unsaid things, the things that are unsaid, that people may need to hear or may not need to hear, to read between those lines, to really resonate with what you're talking about. So I really get what you're saying. This comes up a lot, actually. People try and centralize everything, and then they realize, well, actually, we probably need to get really, into the population to connect with them, to understand those little nuances in what they're expecting and what certain words mean as well in certain contexts and all that type of stuff, because things can really be misconstrued, can't they?
And that's what the tricky part. It's not about changing who we are and changing what we say that we are. It's just there are ways of saying it that can have a big effect. Being flexible here is interpreted in a certain way for us, and it is going to be interpreted in a very different way somewhere else. But that doesn't mean that they don't want flexibility.
Exactly.
It's just that they need to hear it in a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. But no, you know what? I think this has been, I've really, really enjoyed talking to you, Victor. It's been so good. And I think we've managed to do exactly what we set out to do. You've given some really good concrete examples of what people can be doing at the beginning. I think that you've been honest throughout. So I really want to say thank you for that. Like, you've really shared everything, which is really good. And the advice you give is really practical. I think people will be able to take some of this stuff away and actually go and implement some of this now. I don't see why people couldn't do that. And that was one of the goals of what we wanted to do. Not just talk pie in the sky of consulting speak of all these acronyms that nobody has a clue what we're talking about.
Right.
And I really think that what you're doing is the right thing, in the sense that you're sharing with people internally what you're doing. You're keeping people updated. You're doing this kind of like multifunctional role where you're going across all the different teams to try and keep everyone informed about what's going on, so people get buy-in from that and people can see that this is a project that's moving forward, right? And I think that's a really good and that's really good as well. So do you have anything left that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Good luck.
Employer branding.
One of the hidden difficulties is that employer branding is still quite a new topic, and so you kind of have to push basic things quite often. And when I say that I keep people up to speed, it's also about informing that, first of all, I'm here, I'm an employee in the company, this is what I do, and I have to kind of keep reminding people about this, just because it's not something that is, it's not like an accountant that you have to have in every company. It's something that we've chosen to focus on, and that's why I'm here. So you have to keep this battle almost into proving how useful this is all the time. And so good luck everyone out there who's having this battle right now. I know it can be quite tiresome at times, but it's very rewarding when you finally have a nice project that you set up that does actually come through and you see the nice results. It's all worth it in the end.
Exactly. As you said, fail, learn, succeed.
Exactly.
So just finally, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how could they do that? Or if they're following what you're doing, where's the best place for them to follow you?
I think LinkedIn would be a good place. I'm somewhat active there. I'm trying to be, at least when I'm not on the BlaBlaCar LinkedIn channel. So feel
Perfect.
free to connect with them there. I love talking about employer branding just like I did today.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Victor. We'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon. Thank you a lot for the invitation.
You're welcome.